Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela. Children must be taught how to think, not what to think. Margaret Mead. Give a girl an education and introduce her properly into the world, and 10 to 1, but she has the means of settling well without further expense to anybody. Jane Austen. You educate a man, you educate a man. You educate a woman, you educate a generation. Brigham Young. I believe that the rights of women and girls is the unfinished business of the 21st century. Hillary Clinton. To educate girls is to reduce poverty. Kofi Annan. Until we get equality in education, we won't have an equal society. Sonia Sotomayor. I truly believe the only way we can create global peace is through not only educating our minds, but our hearts and our souls. Malala Yousafzai. When girls are educated, their countries become stronger and more prosperous. Michelle Obama. I'm going to talk about women's education in Africa and how it's important in order for Africa to have success in becoming a successful country, and how it's been ignored for many years. In my own life, education has been something that I have been blessed to have. I've had many influential teachers, female educators, who have pushed me to be my best. In high school, I had a French teacher who not only pushed me to do my best in the classroom, but she pushed me to go above and beyond. Each year in my 4 years of high school and my 4 years of French, I was entered in a French poetry competition because of my teacher, because she expected me to not just do the bare minimum, but to go above and beyond, because she knew that's what I could do, and she knew that's how I would best learn. One of my most influential young women's leaders was a woman who had her engineering degree, and she encouraged all of the young women to get an education and to not rely on men to have that for them, but to take their education into their own hands. And just this year at BYU, I've had a professor who has encouraged me to think about continuing my education into graduate school. And without these women in my life, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have the confidence that I have to continue learning more and to stretch myself. And as women in America, we're very blessed to live in a country that has these opportunities and is encouraging of women pursuing their goals to be educated and to be prosperous and to contribute to society in ways outside of the normal housewife's duties. Although those are important, that doesn't mean that a woman can't be educated. And so education in Africa has had slow beginnings. At first, it was limited to just boys who converted to Christianity. Women were not included in the first discussions of education in many African colonies that missionaries were in. When women were included, according to one of the articles I read by Fiona Leach, entitled Resisting Conformity, Anglican Mission Women and the Schooling of Girls in the 19th Century West Africa. Apparently in West Africa, women were not taught arithmetic, and they did not get as much time to learn the basics of reading and writing. But they learned how to sew, and they learned how to be housewives, and they learned how to serve the boys who were at the school learning. And that was part of their education, and that was what the missionaries stressed for their education, was how to be a housewife. And while that was essential, and while being a good woman and being a good wife is essential, that's not something that these African women needed to learn. It's not something that they were lacking already. Women were already powerful figures in African tribes, and they were already influential in their husbands' lives, and so that wasn't something that Western civilization brought that was new. Instead, arithmetic and reading and writing, those things were new, but these girls were being ignored when it came to learning those things. And that was part of their setback today is that when missionaries first came to Africa, they weren't allowing women to learn the same things as men. And so there was no female empowerment. And even today, the education that women are receiving, the few that are lucky enough to go to school and receive an education, they are still learning things that are geared towards males. The curriculums are especially geared towards teaching white male figures that are important in history. But you do have figures like the author of Unbowed, Maathai. She is a great example of a woman who is educated from Kenya and is able to contribute to her society and contribute to her country, and she's also a role model for all the kids in the African continent as well. But she is not being taught as much as white men are being taught in the schools. And so the curriculum in these African schools is geared towards empowering men. And so that is a problem that I read in another article for the comparative analysis paper. Also, there's the addressing of girls who are impregnated when they're still in high school or in what would be the equivalent of junior high. They're forced to quit school so they can work and take care of the child. And the male partners they don't suffer any consequences. They are still able to go to school and they're still able to study, and they aren't held responsible for the care and upkeep of the child. And so that is a problem as well, is that these girls are being victimized in a situation that takes two to even occur. And you can even see that sometimes in the United States, where a girl who gets pregnant in high school, she either drops out of high school or she has to take a year off, and the guy continues his education. In my high school, when this would happen, oftentimes the guy was a football player who had a scholarship, and he would go on to have he would go on to college, and the girl that he got pregnant, they would often break up, and she would be left back in our hometown taking care of the child while the dad was playing football and getting a higher education. And so you see these inequalities not only in Africa but also in America, and these are things that we all need to work towards overcoming. And so education for everyone is important, but especially for women. As you heard in the quotes that I read in the beginning, people have studied women who are educated and found that their impact on society and on generations has a greater influence than the impact of men, just because they are the ones who have the children. And so if you have an educated mother and she's teaching you the necessities of everyday life, and you're around her all the time as a child growing up, then obviously you're going to be influenced by the education that she has, if she has an education. And so that's why it's so important, if Africa is going to progress as a continent, and if the countries within Africa are going to make progress, that they educate their women. Because without the education of their women, they're not going to be able to have that same progress that other countries are starting to have as women's rights become made more equal with men's rights. And so education is essential, and I am excited for the opportunities that I have, and I feel very lucky. And I only hope that the education system in Africa continues to progress, and that women in Africa continue to fight for their rights and their abilities to learn and to become educated women.